We hear time and again that we should put people first, that we should look at building our networks. Why is that important? On today's podcast with Bryon Morrison, the founder and CEO of Proxxy, a business that helps executive leaders and small, medium-sized enterprises scale profitably, predictably, we find out just that. Bryon is a fascinating mind, someone who is leading the charge with artificial intelligence. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth Podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Bryon, pleasure to have you on the podcast.
It's great to be here, Joe. Thanks.
I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
So it depends on every organization, right? It's different for each group. Growth is something, if we want to talk about the bigger world, it's what we all strive for, right? We want to become more as individuals. We want to become more as fathers, as companies, as all of the above. And so growth is something that you strive for at all times and continue to learn and get better. And that's really what growth is. I imagine you're speaking about something that's a lot more specific from a business perspective, but growth is a positive mindset, I think.
See, it's interesting because I think when I ask that question, it throws people into different directions. Some people talk about it from the lens you spoke about there, where it's more of a holistic definition of life. Others are very money, financially, business orientated, but I find it quite often for me, it tells me a fair amount about a person based on how they answer that question. Would you say that your definition of the answer has evolved as your life has expanded, or it's been pretty rigid in that sense?
No, for sure. I mean, I think about the 23-year-old Bryon Morrison that, was just getting started and started his first company. And, I didn't know anything. And if you'd have asked me that question, I probably would have said, 10% growth year over year, increased top line, decreased bottom line. I probably would have looked at it strictly from a business perspective. But I think, the more times you go around the globe, the more you get exposed to different perspectives, and you recognize that it's, you're a small piece of a bigger thing.
With that, what sort of perspectives from traveling the world do you think have shaped you the most?
And I think, it's funny that you say travel the world, because I think travel is one of the things that really changes a person fundamentally. You just think differently when you experience more cultures, different people, different ways that things are done. And so I think travel alone, has been a big part of that. But I think along the way, sorry?
Where have you been to?
Your camera is really...
Where have you visited? What countries have you visited?
Primarily around, Latin America and Europe. So, London, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Germany, Austria, and we currently are building a house in Costa Rica and all over Latin America. So, yeah, I love different cultures. And, I used to work in Omnicom, which is a large holding company of advertising agencies. And one of the coolest things that they do, and, it's one of those things that makes you go, corporate America is not that bad. This is great. Because they created a thing called Omnicom University, where they brought, all the top leaders from the entire world together to study in a group with, Harvard professors that had put together an amazing experience. And it was just fantastic to be able to see all of those different perspectives in one room from literally everywhere in the world, and great minds. So, yeah, I think it's exposure, right? Putting yourself in a position where you can meet new people and you can try new things and you can be exposed to other ways.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with the perspective of travel, new culture shaping your perspective. And I myself, I'm 30, and for me, I've probably spent the last 3, possibly 4 years, probably half the time in the UK, half the time out of the UK, traveling to the countries or continents you mentioned, South America, Europe, Australasia, Asia. And I think the cultures and the richness you get from the experience of travel, seeing the idiosyncrasies and the uniqueness from different countries and the way how people do things, and even the way how people eat their breakfasts, or how much care people put into stuff. And I don't mean in the sense of people don't care, but the way how there's little subtle arts to what they're doing. And I would say I hope one of the best qualities that travel and exploration has given me is just calmness, just realizing that, as you said, we're microcosms in this massive universe, and in 100 years' time, none of us will be alive. There'll be a completely new set of generations and generations. But when we're working and operating on our lives, we're so fixed on the small details. And I was talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and he's like, I know what you're going to say to me. He said, if it won't matter in 5 years' time, why are you making it matter now? And I think so many things that go on in our lives, that bad things happen, but we have a choice as to how we react to them. And we have quite a perspective on, is this good? Is this bad? Or is this indifferent? And a lot of things that happen in life are perspective based. Business might not be good for 1 year, but is that setting you up for really building a stable foundational structural business that is going to push you for the next 10, 15 years? I'm just curious, if you were to look back and you were to give one golden rule to 23-year-old Bryon, what would you say to him?
Oh, I would say invest in people. Invest in relationships. It's an investment that always gives good returns. It's the network that you create and the good that you do for other people does come back to you. And that's one of those things that, people say that a lot, but, the older you get, the more gray hair you get, the more you realize that's really true. So I was always like that anyway, but I think early in my career, I was thinking about like, what is the next thing I'm going to execute? What is the next thing I'm going to do in work, as opposed to, um, not as opposed to, but just ahead of what can I do for this person that I just met. And so now my, exposure today is really focused on help first, and then start to recognize how that can be mutually beneficial if that's possible. And if not, you've done your part and you move on to the next thing.
So if you were a young entrepreneur and they said, great advice, how would you tactically implement that in today's society?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, oftentimes at Proxxy, we'll work with executives who are they're evolving, they are growing, and they're either in buy, sell, or scale mode, typically in their businesses. And so a part of that is, that's one of the things that we impart onto them, bless you, is to start to understand what is your network and what does that look like and how can you invest in your network. So one of the things we talk about a lot is your own personal CRM. I mean, tactically, do you have a system in place that keeps track of your relationships? And then can you do things to invest in that relationship? Like, have I set up my Google alert that is going to tell me that I should reach out to someone when something happens in their industry because I find that interesting and I want to let them know that I'm thinking about them. Those are the differences. Do you send thank you notes, right? Do you follow up with intention for that individual? So those are literally things that we set up. CRM is certainly one of the things that we always talk to customers and companies about, is setting up your CRM, but also, have you done that on a personal level? Have you thought about the relationships in your life? And that's just one of the projects that we often take on.
Some of the most successful leaders that I've spoken to on here and privately have said to me, and I think this is where a lot of young people are going wrong, is they're trying to do too many of the scalable things too quickly, as opposed to, as you said, building relationships, doing the things that might take more time. They might be unsexy. They might writing a handwritten note. It takes time, and if you, like me, you make spelling mistakes or your handwriting isn't too polished, or I'm left-handed, so quite often I smudge the paper, so it takes me longer to write something really intentional out. Then it's these things that, and I remember this was years ago. I sent out a load of handwritten Christmas cards, clients, prospects, whoever, and it was probably about 6 or so months later, I get a random message from someone who says, "Hey, I want to work together." And as we were there, he said to me, he's like, "I just want to let you know the reason why I want to work with you is because," and I didn't even realize this, but he said, "You sent a Christmas card to my parents' address. It wasn't even his, and it was the only Christmas card he got all that year in the post." And he said that was it. That was enough for me to move ahead with you. So I think you look at the ROI on that, 100x.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anytime you, like I said, it's an easy investment. Ron Johnson, who was the CEO of J.C. Penney, when I was working with them in the agency world, I remember he said, we can't always be the smartest, we can't be the strongest, we can't be, um, unique things like that, but we can always be the kindest. And I thought that was great advice, and I've imparted that on my son and the students that I've taught in school, and I just think that's an easy thing that we can all do.
From your perspective, someone who's run a business for a good amount of time, do you feel or what are the distinct differences that you see in the way how business is being done today versus, say, 30 years ago?
Well, the obvious answer is systems, right? I mean, especially with as we're at the advent of AI, everyone is enamored with the technology, as they should be. They should be working with it, playing with it, and experimenting. But um, we talk often about where automation should live, and there is a need for it. But you can also overly depend on it, and it can take some of the heart out of business. And so I think there's a balance, just as there is with everything. There's a balance in how we go about doing work. Um, I think you have to, just like you have to look in your business at where your marketplace fit is and where you are perfectly oriented. I think you have to think about that with your own personal skill set. As a practitioner, where do I provide my absolute greatest value? And that's the human aspect of what you do. And at times you can apply systems to be able to get more out of that and to be able to do it more often. Um, but you have to be conscious. And, I always talk about this shift from intuition to intent. The concept of, I intuitively know that's why we're good at certain things. But if I do that with intent, I can look at oftentimes where it can be repeated, and I can use systems, but I can still be connected. So I think that's one of the most important things is just, today I see a lot of companies running towards automation to the point that it's just completely, gutted the heart from their company.
I'm really revolving around the concept you just spoke about there, intuition to intent. I have a word of the year for every year. I'd be curious to know if you have one yourself. But this year it's intentionality, be intentional, and something I was writing down every day in my journal and just focusing on what I'm doing. So it's piqued my interest, the fact that you've raised that. Do you do anything of sorts? Have a word of the year or have a mantra or ethos within the business that you really stick towards?
Yeah, we have, there can be, you can theme what's going on in a year, and, it gives everyone focus. Um, I also believe heavily in, values and being consistent in your values, and that's typically not one word. So, it just depends on what's going on. When it's funny that you say that because, one thing we did, my son, he was going to college. trying to figure out where he wanted to go. And we traveled all around the East Coast and South United States, and we went to 8 different colleges in 8 days. And so we'd wake up in the morning, we'd drive a few hours, go look at a college, go out that night in the area and experience that, get up in the morning, do the exact same thing. And on the drive the next day, my wife, my son, and I would each come up with a word for each school. And it was one of the most fascinating things because at the end of it, we had, 8 different schools. Each one of us had 8 different words. And it was just, it boils it all down to a simple perspective. And oftentimes that one word is all it takes. So it's a cool experience. So yeah, I like that idea, for business owners to be able to clarify things and keep things simple for customers.
What college did you go for in the end?
Well, he actually ended up getting recruited to play football, and so he plays football at DePaul University, just outside of Indianapolis, which is why we live in Indianapolis for the football season, and then go back to Dallas, and then go to Costa Rica and move around.
Nice. So just talking about Proxxy, and I know we've alluded to the business. Just for the sake of the listeners, could you just give a high-level summary of what you guys do?
Yeah, Proxxy is an executive multiplier. When leaders in small to medium-sized businesses get to a certain stage, they run into challenges, typically operating the business, leading the business, transforming the business, scaling the business. There's different stages as you expand in size. And the challenge, you hear people talk about it all the time, work on the business, not in the business. And then there's a reality to the fact that you can't. You are naturally drawn into the business. That's why you are the leader in your respective area, because you're great at something. And so that takes real work. And what we have found is there is a collection of things that need to get done at each one of those stages. And we believe that's a role. That's a role in an organization. And the reason most companies don't do them and don't do them well is because they don't have somebody leading that charge. And it typically, in a small to medium-sized business, it falls back on the leader. And so that's what Proxxy solves. We put a strategist and an integrator next to that CEO or that top level executive, so that way they have a right hand that continues to work on the business relentlessly.
Typically, at what stage will people come and work with you guys at?
Usually, it's for us. It's typically employee count based, and so it's typically companies that have gotten to about 20 to 25 employees up to 500. But really, that space between 25 employees and 250 employees, you go through so many different growth stages that is one of those things that when we start with a company, early in that phase, we tend to work with them for a long period of time. And we make that, our business is literally built around making that simple. I won't get into, how the clock is made as much, but just knowing that you have somebody relentlessly focused on those really important initiatives as you grow through each of those growth stages is what gives companies that confidence to be able to start thinking differently about, should I go buy another company, or am I ready to sell for the highest value, or am I ready to scale and continue growing this?
And obviously you don't need to give the client names or whatever, but what 1 or 2 instances that you're massively proud of the impact you guys have been able to make?
Well, we've been around for 6 years, so we've had countless success stories. But I mean, we have one company that we started with, just like I was talking about. They were about 25 employees, and when they contacted us, they said, we were killing it. We were doing so well, and then all of a sudden, things just kind of topped out, and we just keep ramming our head into the wall. We can't figure out why, and that's not uncommon. because at 25 employees, that is a different company. Fundamentally, things change in that process. Leaders have to change. And in that scenario, the leader who was running the business was still in the business. They were the top salesperson, and they couldn't figure out why, everything wasn't working. And so in that scenario, we installed a business operating system. We helped that organization identify how to be a metrics driven business, and we established the enterprise metrics. In that scenario, the biggest situation they had was their sales team. They just kept turning over salespeople, and they hadn't done that before. But at this size, they kept losing their salespeople, and they couldn't figure it out. And so every time they would hire, a batch of salespeople, they'd plan on at least 3/4 of them not making it. And they just thought that's the way things worked. And we identified, just by watching their processes, capturing data at each of the stages, we identified that it was the way they were helping and teaching those people to go out and sell, and then what they were focusing on for product in the marketplace. That company, we hired 4 salespeople, and they said, well, we hope one makes it. And we said, well, let's shoot for 3. And in that scenario, we kept all 4, and all of them were very successful. And so then from that point on, it just changed everything in the business, and we just kept working through all of the challenges in the business. Today, they own 3 different businesses. We've hired presidents or COOs for each of them, and we've worked with them for 6 years, and they've tripled their business. They are, thinking constantly about, when is the right time to sell that company. They just keep seeing opportunity and acquiring other companies. And so it's interesting just to watch that natural evolution, because they didn't go out and say, I got to get ready to sell. They said, I got to get ready to be valuable. I have to be the most valuable company I can. And of course, people are going to come to me and ask me if I want to sell the company, but I want to be in a power position, and I want to be ready to do that when it makes sense for me. So I think that's ultimately what we work toward, is how do we give options? How do we get to a point where the owner, the founder, the CEO can decide, as opposed to being boxed into a corner and having to do something?
I'm intrigued. You mentioned you helped them recruit and hire 4 sales representatives there. What were when you guys went out, looked for these people, what were the characteristics? What do you think was the fundamental change between the previous batch being 75% unsuccess rate to what happened where you brought these 4 salespeople in and they helped the business grow?
It wasn't the individuals. They recruited well before. They just couldn't retain them. And a friend of mine always talks about this metaphor of, or this analogy of house plants. And I think it's actually really relevant, because if you go and you buy a bunch of house plants and they keep dying, either you're going to the wrong place to buy house plants, or the environment is wrong. You don't water them correctly, you don't put them in the sun, or you give them too much sun. That was what we found. It wasn't the house plants. The environment was wrong, and they weren't giving them the right kind of information. They were giving them different instruction. They were turning them over all the time with, go do this. No, wait, stop doing that. Go do this. Oh my gosh, the sky is falling. Let's go do this. We have to go do this. It was pressure change all the time. And the more we got to a point where we recognized, if you'll follow up with someone at this stage repeatedly, you will have more success. And when you have more success, you will have more sales. And if you have more sales, you'll bring in more money, you will have higher commissions, you will be more satisfied. And so it was really a matter of changing their environment, not changing the individuals that they were recruiting. It was a good example of, like, they had good intuition. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but they had good intuition. They did not have great intent.
I'm intrigued, Bryon. Talking about AI, this is what we spoke about a few weeks ago when we spoke. I know that you guys implement AI, you help people with AI. Where do you see amongst the clients and businesses that you work with the biggest changes occurring over the next 12 months?
Well, I think just that AI evolution, their own experience in the space, every single client that we work with, that will change in the next 12 months, their experience with that. And then you move from the individuals understanding it to them having a thoughtful approach from a system perspective to the entire organization. How will AI be used in the entire organization? And so that I think in the next year, there's so many companies that we work with that are talking to us about, like, how do I create a center of excellence around AI? How do I make sure that my organization is using this, and that, they all know that if they don't, it puts them in a very dangerous position in the long run. So I don't think there's any surprise there. The other thing that I think you have to balance is you are learning, you are changing, you are enabling your organization for AI, but AI is changing at an even more rapid pace. So, when you talk about what will change in the next 12 months, I think it's exponential.
And internally, with you guys, are you using much? Well, evidently you are, but what sort of elements or what programs are you using to help you grow? When you sit down with the team, the executives, and say, this is how we want to use AI to help us grow over the next period, and this is how we want to be thought leaders, we want to set precedents and example amongst the partners that we're with. What does that look like internally?
Yeah, so we started, 2, 3 years ago talking about AI and ChatGPT. Obviously, OpenAI made a massive change. Myself, my partner, we'd worked around machine learning, and we were familiar with how do you get data in a place where you can actually use it. So much of what we're doing in AI is about enablement. And so we had gone through that process, and we'd already put our information into a usable structure. We had already gone through and examined our processes heavily. And so we were basically able to just plug AI in wherever it made sense. So our job was really to look at pilot programs. Where can we start implementing and testing? And so we did that, and we started with our marketing team, and they did an exceptional job of continuously testing in the content development process, in the how do we make sure that we're editing it properly? How is it working from an SEO perspective? All of those things. We started that a couple of years ago, and then that just naturally evolved through the entire organization to the point that I think everybody in our organization is very comfortable using large language models and being able to develop that as a thought partner as they go through that process of helping companies. And so they're very familiar with that. But then, our pilot programs that we've gotten to, they've actually, like, we've developed product internally, and it's, vibe code product, and it would have taken, I've been through product development, it would have taken us years. We were turning out versions in 6 months. And so just watching that process, and then also seeing how great ideas bubble up from our team. So we have a Slack channel that, everybody does put what they're reading about, what they see, different apps they're testing, different ways that they have used it with clients. They're posting that every day.
I'm with you. Bryon, what's next for you, and where can people find you?
So Proxxy's, I was at an event, and it was an M&A event, and they said, how many founders in the room would like to sell their company? And I think everybody in the room raised their hand, but I did not. And that's because I love what I do. I have worked up to this point to be able to do what I do with people that I love. And so I'm in a really good spot. So when you ask me what's next, I think it's continue to scale, continue to help more companies be more successful leaders to be able to get them in that power position so that they can move from that mindset of operating in the business to truly leading the business, and then being able to transform and scale. Those are the things I want to continue to do and will continue to do. And the opportunity to be able to help other companies do that, that's what I want to do. So in terms of how people can find us, they can go to proxxy.com, and that's two X's. So proxxy.com. And then, I'm sure you'll post my email and phone, and I field calls all the time. I'm always happy to help. I think anybody who knows myself, my partners, the people in our organization, we are very, very willing to have a conversation to be able to help just identify what's the next step. And we've seen so many small to medium-sized businesses that, literally hundreds of organizations. So when you say, well, something's not working in my company and it's really unique to me, it may not be that unique. It may be one of those things that we've seen in another organization, might even be a different industry, but we can draw upon that and be able to help. And sometimes that can be a really quick answer. But most of the time, it's a challenge of just being able to figure out like who can do that job, who will own it. And that's where the Proxxy can come in and make huge changes.
Bryon, thank you.
It's my pleasure, Joe. Thanks for having me on.